This is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. A new ordinance set to go into effect as early as next month aims to preserve affordable housing in parts of Humboldt Park, Westtown, Logan Square, Avondale, and Hermosa. Home prices in those neighborhoods have risen sharply over the last decade, in part due to the elevated trail of the 606. It opened in 2015. In Logan Square, for example, the price of 2 to 4 flats along the trail more than quadrupled between 2012 and 2018. And more than half of 2 to 6 flats in the area were torn down. Rising home prices means rising property taxes, not to mention higher rents. And many longtime residents have been forced out. The 35th Ward Alderman Carlos Ramirez-Rosa is one of the lawmakers who's behind the new plan to stop that from happening. And he joins us now in studio. Welcome back, Alderman.
Hey, Sasha.
Also here in studio is Gary Jimenez, housing organizer at Palenque LSNA. That stands for Liberating Space Through Neighborhood Action. Thank you for being here, Gary.
Thank you for having me.
As a lifelong resident of Humboldt Park, Gary, I want you to just bring this to life for us. What have the changes to the neighborhood been like for you?
Yeah, so just starting off, I grew up in Chicago all my life. I've been living in Humboldt Park, moving around a little bit, especially throughout my high school years. I'm having to move around a lot. And, you know, at that age, 14, 15, I was very uncertain as to why. Couldn't understand the bigger concepts, but I just understood that my parents were like, hey, we got to move around, you know, and seeing a lot of my friends move out from the neighborhood that I grew up on.
And to be clear, when you say you're moving around, I mean, you were getting priced out.
Yeah.
You were getting priced out and you moved further west.
Yes. So around 14, 15 years, since I was born, I lived around California and North Avenue. I've lived there all my life, my childhood. I went to school around there, Moose Elementary, and then I had to move at 15 years old when the 606 opened. My parents said, hey, the landlord's going to raise our rent for $200. We got to move out. And I said, dang, like, you know, I'm so accustomed to here.
Right.
And at that time, I had just started my first year at George Westinghouse College Prep, and I was so happy to be there. And, you know, it was really difficult early on having to move around so much. And then, you know, eventually at 18 years old, right around 2018, my parents were able to secure, a loan to buy a house in the west side of Humboldt Park, right by Pulaski and North Avenue. But it was a very drastic change to look at how, you know, the buildings changed. That's what I could describe at the time with my limited knowledge, right? Knowing like, the buildings are changing. Like I'm noticing like these big glass structures coming into the neighborhood. And I was like, they don't look like my house. And I was questioning like, why don't they look like my house?
Interesting. Give us the basics here, Alderman. I mean, what is the ordinance doing to try to keep people in their homes and not have to do what Gary's family had to do?
Yeah, so the Northwest Side Housing Preservation Ordinance is the culmination of years of work led by Palenque LSNA, a broad coalition of alder people. We looked at the data around the 606 trail in the Northwest Side neighborhoods that we represent. And what we found was that the city's greatest source of naturally occurring affordable housing, so that's housing that's affordable to middle and working class families without receiving any government subsidy, without the rent being capped or regulated by any program. So the greatest source of naturally occurring affordable housing in our neighborhoods is found in 2, 3, and 4 flats, what urban planners call middle housing. So we have single family homes, we have high rises, but the vast majority of us are going to live in middle housing. We're going to live in a multifamily apartment building. It's the courtyard building. It's the 2 flat, the 3 flat. But as Logan Square, as Humboldt Park, as these communities become more desirable and as more people move in, what we've seen is that folks are purchasing these 2 flats, 3 flats, and 4 flats, and they're turning them into luxury single-family homes. And so we're losing that density that's so critical to keep our school enrollment high, that's so critical to bring customers to our commercial corridors, and that's so critical to affordability.
Yeah.
Property taxes go up because that, you know, luxury single-family home is selling for a lot more. Or in some instances, we would see the demolition of existing 3-flat buildings, and they would be replaced with a 3-condo building.
Right.
But those condos and those units were so much more expensive than what they replaced.
So this ordinance now puts in place demolition surcharges that are higher.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And tenants also get the opportunity to purchase first.
That's right. Yeah.
Tell
So
us
there's
more.
a lot of good things in this ordinance. It touches upon 4 things. One, it disallows the conversion of these 2 flats, 3 flats, and 4 flats into single family homes. So if a majority of the block is multifamily, you can only build multifamily there. 2, if you tear down an existing naturally occurring affordable building, You have to pay $20,000 per unit or $60,000 per building, whichever is more. And the funds generated through this surcharge go to the Here to Stay Land Trust, which works in the community to replace that affordability that was lost. 3, if you are a tenant, and this is so great, whether it's a 1-unit condo that you're renting, whether it's a single-family home that you're renting, or a 20-unit building that's being rented, those tenants will have the first opportunity to purchase that building when it goes to sale.
Interesting.
We're not regulating the price, so you have to be able to match the price, but it gives tenants an opportunity to be able to purchase their home and stay there. And then lastly, it also legalizes the construction of new 2-flats by right. These communities were zoned single family decades ago. That was a mistake because the vast majority of housing in these communities is multifamily.
Right.
And so it really brings that zoning for that area into alignment with the predominant housing type, which is multifamily.
So, Gary, when you hear that breakdown, I mean, what do you think the impact of this ordinance will be on your neighborhood of Humboldt Park and others like Logan Square?
Yeah, when I hear this, I think the first emotion that comes up is hope. I'm very hopeful for a lot of the people who have lived in Humboldt Park to have an opportunity to stay there, right? When I looked at these new glass buildings, I said, hey, this was developers looking at my community and saying, hey, this land is for sale. We're able to purchase this. We have a lot of funds, and we have the competition to be able to purchase these homes. And I was like, dang, like my family are both immigrant parents, and so they're obviously not going to have the same amount of resources of some other families that have been here for generations. But my family was like, hey, I wanted to start in Humboldt Park, and I want to give my kids an opportunity. And I'm very grateful for my parents. And so now I'm yet more hopeful to hear that, the existing buildings can continue to stay there.
Right. And I want to get more of a lay of the land here, Alderman. The area affected by the ordinance goes from Division or Hirsch on the south to Addison on the northern end, and from Western out to Pulaski or Costner, depending on the block. Why that area specifically, and how would you compare dynamics that are at play in, say, Westtown or maybe Avondale?
Yeah. So we looked at neighborhood level data. We looked at where are deconversions occurring, where is naturally occurring affordable housing in this middle housing, these 2-flats to 4-flats, where is it prevalent, where is it abundant, where is that the predominant housing type? Where have we seen the character of our communities change with, longtime residents being pushed out and the housing being demolished or converted to single-family homes. So based upon that data at the neighborhood level, we determine the boundaries. Ultimately, it takes in parts of 6 wards, and all of those wards, their aldermen were supportive. Alderman Daniel Espada, Alderwoman Jessie Fuentes of the 26th Ward, Alderwoman Ruth Cruz of the 30th Ward, Alderman Felix Cardona of the 31st, Rosana Rodriguez of the 33rd, and Gil Villegas of the 36th. So it takes in portions of 6 wards, and it covers all of those communities. So we were looking both at neighborhood boundaries, but also the data block by block and the trends that have been occurring over the past several years.
If you're just tuning in, this is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons, and we're talking about the Northwest Side's Housing Protection Ordinance, where it came from and what it means for residents. We're discussing that with 35th Ward Alderman Carlos Ramirez Rosa and Gary Jimenez, who is a housing organizer with Palenque LSNA. Now, you should note that the National Weather Service has issued a tornado warning for parts of southern Cook County until 12:45 p.m. Now, this includes suburban Chicago Heights, Park Forest, and Homewood. Weather officials warn that should any tornadoes take place, you won't be able to see any rotation due to the rain. So turning back to the conversation, Alderman, you mentioned there that only 3 aldermen, it passed overwhelmingly, but 3 aldermen did oppose to this, right? So with so much support, why only this area and not a larger section of the city?
Well, 1, it's a pilot. 2, we're looking at neighborhood level data. 3, some of these protections are already in place through neighborhood level pilots. So for example, tenant opportunity to purchase, it exists in many different cities, but it was first brought to Chicago through the Woodlawn Housing Preservation Ordinance that Alderwoman Jeanette Taylor worked to pass last term. And that ordinance applies to buildings of 10 units or more because so much of the housing in Woodlawn is larger buildings.
Yeah.
It was important for us piloting this on the Northwest Side to ensure that we included all residential tenants, because so many of the buildings are 2 flats, 3 flats, and 4 flats, much smaller than that 10-unit building. We've heard from a lot of older people that have said, I'm interested in expanding this and bringing this pilot and these types of protections to my community. We think that's a great thing, and we think that this ordinance can help pave the way. This ordinance was built upon the success of prior ordinances. So we first piloted this just around the 606 trail in a much smaller geographic area that covered only portions of Logan Square and Hermosa. We piloted both the demolition surcharge. At that point in time, it was $5,000 per unit or $15,000 per building. And we also piloted the predominance of block, which disallows the deconversion of these multifamily buildings into single-family homes. That pilot found that these policies were successful, but what it also found was that we didn't generate a lot of money. Housing costs have gone up. The cost of preserving and maintaining affordable housing, particularly in areas that are experiencing such rising housing costs, is very expensive. So it was important for us to increase the surcharge, but it was also important for us to expand the boundaries and to expand the protections to better reflect the data that we were seeing on the ground.
And the ordinance, as I said, it passed with the support of more than 100 neighborhood organizations, including yours, Gary. I mean, just tell us a bit more about that process and just the energy that was generated when you got 100 groups coming together.
Yeah, so not only did we get the 100 groups, but we also got 1,000 signatures to accompany that from specifically the wards that we were targeting here. So my work at Palenque LSNA is housing organizer, and that's to not only educate folks, but to, kind of hype them up, be like, hey, what is this happening? Listen to the folks and what they're asking for. And so part of a big initiative that we did over the summer was we got a group of volunteer youth from colleges mainly, and we got them to go out and canvas, and we got them to be on the blue line, and we said, hey, let's talk to people. Let's really go on the ground and say, what are we working on and what are their issues? And as usual, we hear from a lot of residents like, hey, the biggest issue that we're seeing is property taxes. Like, we're almost being forced to move out. We don't want to move out, and we feel like we're not being heard. We feel like we need a voice in this. And we said, okay, hey, we've been working on this. It's called the 606 demolition ordinance. That's what it was formerly known as. And we said, hey, this is going to help by reducing the amount of glass boxes that you're seeing in your neighborhood. And and a lot of the neighbors are like, yes, like I noticed that they don't cater to me, right? The rents, they're over like $2,000 for like studios.
Yeah.
And they're like, I have kids. Like, I'm not going to do anything with the studio.
Yeah.
And so, through the garner of being at the blue line and then also door-to-door knocking, we were able to get over 1,000 signatures, and as well as talking to other organizations that not only do housing work, right? But that do so many different avenues of work, like education, right? Through parents in schools, right? We can hear their struggles, and their struggles are, hey, we're being priced out, and I want my kid to continue going to this school. How can we help preserve the housing that's happening here?
So we know Chicago's a segregated city, right? And I'm curious, before I let you both go, the effect you each think that this ordinance could have on the racial and economic diversity of neighborhoods. You first, Gary.
Yeah, for me, I think I hope that we're able to, first of all, keep as many people of color, mainly Latinx and Black residents in our neighborhoods, right? Logan Square still is a predominantly Latinx community, and we want to be able to preserve the roots that we've built here, right? We've built this community from the ground up, and we should be able to enjoy the fruits of labor, such as the 606, right? I grew up right along the 606, a block away, and to just be able to be priced out, and then suddenly someone who's a lot more wealthier to be able to enjoy something that we've been advocating for so long. A lot of us, we want safer streets, right? We want bikeable and walkable paths. We want to be able to live in a rich environment or a rich neighborhood, but we're not able to simply because of the wealth and resources that we don't have that other people do. So I'm really hoping that this ordinance continues to aim to help protect the people that are already here. People like to say like, Logan Square is already gentrified. No, we're not. A lot of us are still here. We're still fighting. Estamos luchando, right? We're continuing to fight for our people because we want to be here and we deserve to be here.
Brief thoughts, Alderman.
Yeah, Chicago has a history and a present of segregation, and we don't want a future where we wake up and 90% of Hermosa, 90% of Logan Square is white and affluent. We don't want to replicate that history of segregation. So there's a lot of diversity that exists right now in the Northwest Side neighborhoods covered by this ordinance, and we want to preserve that and we want to build upon that. We saw in Lincoln Park decades ago where the 2 flats, 3 flats, and 4 flats that were housing working families were converted into luxury single-family homes or were torn down and a beautiful mansion was built up. We don't want to replicate that history in communities like Logan Square. So if you look at where Black and brown and working families of all races live, they live in the 2 flat, 3 flat, and 4 flat. And so by preserving that middle housing, by preserving that density in our communities, we're going to build a future that is diverse, that is integrated. And that's good because the healthiest community, the happiest community is one that is integrated both racially and socioeconomically. And that's the type of future we want to build here for the city of Chicago.
We've been discussing the Housing Prevention Ordinance with Alderman Carlos Ramirez Rosa and housing organizer with Palenque LSNA, Gary Jimenez. Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Sasha.